Apartment 2DF screams at night, but no one lives their psychological mystery drama. It started with a stain, a dark blotch blooming across the ceiling of my bathroom like a shadow with purpose. At first, I thought it was just water damage. Maybe the pipes from the upstairs unit were old, rusted, cracked. But the building was only 6 years old, and maintenance here was unusually fastidious. Management prided themselves on efficiency. You'd file a complaint in the app, and someone would be knocking within hours. But this time, I reported the stain, and no one came. Not that day, not the next, not even the week after. It didn't seem like a big deal, not at first, until it grew. It spread like mold, but without the texture. Just darker, more distinct, a shape that looked less like a leak and more like something pressed hard from above. As if someone had been lying on the floor of the apartment above mine, motionless, for hours. The strange part was, no one lived in 20F. Or at least, that's what I thought. I'd been in this building for over a year, and I'd never seen anyone come or go from that unit. The mailbox was always crammed, the windows perpetually curtained. The hallway in front of it always too quiet, like even sound didn't want to linger. I once asked the woman in 2E if she knew anything about the tenant. She just shook her head and walked faster, muttering something about keeping to yourself in buildings like these. I didn't know what she meant at the time. Now I wish I'd pressed. The first time I heard the noise, I assumed it was the TV. A scream, distant and sharp, just to break the rhythm of my evening routine. I paused mid-toothbrush and listened, but it didn't come again. That was Thursday. On Friday, it happened twice. Screams, not words, just raw sounds, echoing faintly through the vents and vibrating against my tiles. I tried to convince myself it was a show, a movie maybe, or kids messing around, but it was too erratic, too real, like someone had been hurt, like someone was still being hurt. On Sunday night, I stood on the toilet, head pressed to the air vent, trying to catch a clearer noise. What I heard was unmistakable, a voice. A woman's voice, low and frantic, whispering something again and again. It wasn't English. It didn't sound like any language I knew, but there was rhythm to it, like a chant, a prayer, or maybe just a plea. That was the night I decided to go upstairs. I stood outside 2F for 15 minutes, doing nothing but listening. The hallway light above flickered like something out of a cliché horror film. My phone buzzed with a weather alert. Heavy rain expected. The building had gone quiet. No screaming, no whispering, just the steady buzz of fluorescent light and the thud of my own heart. I knocked once. Nothing. I knocked again, louder. Still nothing. I told myself I'd give it one more minute, and then I'd call security, even the police if I had to, but just as I turned to leave, the door creaked open an inch. No chain, no voice inviting me in. Just that 1 inch, enough for me to see inside. The lights were off. The curtains drawn. The air reeked of something sour and metallic. I pushed the door open further and stepped in. The living room looked untouched, like no one had ever used it. Dust coated the TV screen. The couch cushions were still wrapped in plastic. A single chair sat turned toward the window, like someone had spent days staring out at the empty lot across the street. I called out, hesitantly, unsure if I wanted an answer. No one replied. I walked deeper into the unit. Each step felt heavier than the last, like I was being pushed back by the air itself. The hallway was darker than it should have been, considering the lights were on in the living room. That's when I saw the red smear on the wall. About waist height, it looked like blood. Not splattered, dragged. It led to the bedroom door, which was closed. Every part of me wanted to leave. My hands were shaking. My chest tightened. But something else, a pull I can't explain, made me reach for the handle. I turned it slowly. The door creaked open, just a sliver. It was enough. I saw the bed perfectly made, the floor spotless, and in the corner, standing motionless, a figure facing the wall. Hair black and long, clothes simple, gray, hands limp at her sides. I froze, couldn't move, couldn't breathe. Then she turned, not all the way, just her head. Her eyes met mine, and they weren't just eyes, they were wells. Deep, black, bottomless. She didn't blink, she didn't speak, but I heard her voice in my mind, like it had bypassed language altogether and gone straight into me. She said one word, stay. I bolted. Out the door, down the stairs, slammed into my unit, and locked every latch I had. I didn't sleep that night. I don't think I even blinked. The next morning, I tried to rationalize everything. Stress, exhaustion, sleepwalking maybe. But when I opened the bathroom door, the stain was gone, completely vanished, as if it had never existed. I went to the leasing office, asked about 20F. The manager frowned, typed something, then looked at me with a confused tilt of his head. That unit's been sealed for 5 years, he said. No one's lived there since the incident. I asked what incident. He just shook his head. You really shouldn't go poking around. This building's got old stories. Some of them better left alone. But I couldn't leave it, not after what I saw, not after what I heard. Over the next few days, I watched. Every time I left my door, I stared at 20F, it never opened. No one ever came or went, but every night around 2 a.m., the screams would start again. Louder now. Closer. Sometimes I thought they were coming from inside my unit. The chanting returned, but this time it wasn't just one voice, it was two. Then three. Then more. All whispering in unison, all saying the same word I heard in that room. Stay. I moved a chair under the vent and stuffed it with towels. I played white noise to drown it out. I even wore earplugs. None of it worked. The noise wasn't just sound anymore. It was inside me. I tried reaching out to others in the building. A young couple in 2D claimed they'd never heard anything. The old man in 2D stared at me for a full minute before saying, "She's waking up again, huh?" Then he shut the door. After that, I started keeping notes. Every sound, every time, every detail. It became obsessive. My wall was covered in printouts, diagrams, building blueprints I found online. I learned that 20F had once belonged to a woman named Lila Benning. A recluse, according to neighbors. A spiritualist, some said. She never left, never spoke to anyone, never let maintenance in. When she died, they only found her because of the smell. The report said she'd been dead for weeks, face down, hands outstretched, symbols scrawled in blood on the walls and ceiling. The stains had been painted over and the unit sealed. Until somehow she wasn't sealed anymore. Now, the stain on my ceiling is back, and this time it pulses, like a heartbeat. I've stopped sleeping. I only eat when I remember to. My phone has started recording by itself. Video files I never filmed, they're always the same. Footage of my own apartment at night while I lie sleeping. Except I'm not alone. A figure stands over me, hair black, hands limp, face unreadable. The file always ends the same way, with her turning to the camera and whispering, "Stay. I don't know how much longer I can take this. I've thought about leaving, moving out, changing cities, changing names. But I know now it won't help, because the stain keeps following me. And some nights, I wake up to find myself standing under the vent, whispering words I don't understand, carving patterns into the wall with my fingernails. Last night, I heard something new in the whispering, not a chant, not a prayer, a countdown, and it's almost at 0. I tried burning the towels I had stuffed in the vent. It made no difference. The chanting didn't come from the air. It came from the bones of the building. I started sleeping in the bathtub, clutching a hammer, like somehow porcelain and steel could shield me from whatever was pulling itself closer. I told myself I'd last one more week, just enough time to find another apartment, break the lease, move away. But each morning brought with it a kind of amnesia, like I'd forget how bad the previous night had been until the sun dipped below the horizon, and the darkness reminded me that I was never really alone. The worst part, I started seeing her in the mirror, not behind me. As me, my face would shift for a moment when I blinked, my eyes hollowing out, my mouth curling into a smirk I never intended. It never lasted more than a second, but it was long enough to know something was cracking. And not just around me, inside. The woman in 2E stopped answering her door. I saw her once in the laundry room, just standing in front of the dryer with her arms by her sides, eyes staring at the spinning drum. I said her name 3 times before she blinked and turned to me slowly, like her mind had been playing a reel she couldn't pause. She didn't say hello. She only asked, "Have you seen them yet?" I asked, "Who?" She looked at the vent above us and whispered, "They're not just her anymore." Then she walked away, dragging her laundry basket behind her like it weighed as much as her regrets. I didn't sleep that night, not out of fear, because I physically couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I felt pressure on my chest, not sleep paralysis, not a dream. Just pressure, like something kneeling on me, whispering into my skin instead of my ears. Then came the knocking. At first, it was above me, 4 slow taps on the ceiling. Then it moved, behind the walls, under the floor, in the pipes. One night, I was in the hallway around 2 a.m., trying to convince myself to go for a walk, to escape even for a few minutes. That's when I heard the knock inside apartment 20F. Not a knock on the door, but from inside it, like someone tapping gently on glass, or maybe a mirror. I leaned in. The doorknob was warm. Too warm. I backed away and saw movement in the peephole. Just a flicker. Then the door groaned again, the way it had when it first opened itself to me. I ran, but not fast enough to unsee the shape standing just beyond the threshold. She wasn't alone this time. There were others. Their forms were indistinct, shifting like fog in candlelight. And they all had eyes like hers. I stopped going to work. I made up an illness, and my boss didn't press. Maybe they heard it in my voice. Maybe they'd seen it before. My fridge emptied. My phone died, and I let it. Time stopped working the way it used to. Days bled into nights and back again like ink into water. My journal entries became erratic. Pages filled with scribbles I didn't remember writing. Symbols, circles, diagrams. Some entries weren't even in English. I tried translating them, desperate to understand. One phrase kept repeating, "The tenant returns when the building forgets." I didn't know what that meant. Not at first. But the more I looked at the symbols, the more I felt like I did know them in some place deeper than memory. It was like remembering something I'd never learned. One morning, I woke up outside. No phone. No shoes. Just me in the courtyard, standing in the exact center of the building's shadow. A crow sat on the railing and watched me, head tilted like it was waiting for me to move. My hands were dirty, fingertips blackened like they'd been dipped in ash. I looked up and saw my window. It was open. A dark shape leaned out slowly, then pulled back in like it hadn't expected to be seen. I didn't go back up for hours. When I did, everything was wrong. Furniture had been rearranged. My laptop was on, but it only displayed static. The walls were covered in writing. Not paint, not blood. Charcoal. All of it scrawled in my own handwriting. Over and over, "The building breathes." That was when I stopped trying to leave. Not because I didn't want to, but because I realized it didn't matter. The elevator stopped working. The stairs circled back to the same floor no matter how many times I climbed. I tried the fire escape and ended up outside someone else's unit, where a woman I'd never seen before sat weeping into her hands. When she saw me, she only asked, "Is it your turn now?" I didn't answer, because I knew it was. The building had chosen me. That's what it felt like I had passed some invisible threshold, one you couldn't return from. It started giving me visions after that. Not dreams, not hallucinations. Visions. I'd be cooking and suddenly the apartment would shift, walls bleeding into older versions of themselves, wallpaper peeling away in reverse, revealing floral patterns from decades ago. A woman humming a lullaby would walk through my kitchen, cradling a baby that screamed silently. The child had no face. The woman never looked at me. It was like I wasn't there. Or maybe I was always there, and time just blurred itself. One night, I opened my fridge and instead of light, there was a tunnel. No food. Just a narrow, damp passage that seemed to go downward forever. I closed it, breath-ragged. When I reopened it, the milk was back. But it was curdled, warm, and when I poured it into the sink, it hissed like oil on flame. I don't know how long it's been. Weeks, maybe, or more. I stopped keeping track. There's no point. Time loops here, neighbors vanish. New ones appear but never speak. One man moved into 2D last Friday. By Monday, his door was wide open and the apartment inside was completely empty, stripped of furniture, paint, even light fixtures. It was like he'd never existed. But I remember. The building wants me to forget, but I remember his smile, his polite nod in the hallway. The building forgets, but I won't. That's why it hates me. Because I won't let go. Last night, I finally opened my bathroom mirror. There's a small cabinet behind it, barely big enough for medicine. But when I pulled it open this time, it led somewhere else. A room, not mine. A dim place with walls covered in hundreds of newspaper clippings, all yellowed and curling at the edges. I reached inside and pulled one out. It was dated 1974. Tenant vanishes from 20th without a trace. Neighbors report strange noises before disappearance. I flipped 1982. Family of 3 disappears, apartment sealed by city order, 1996. Maintenance worker suffers breakdown after entering sealed unit. Every query article. All from this building. I didn't sleep. I couldn't. Not after what I saw at the back of the cabinet. A mirror, but not mine. And in its reflection wasn't me. It was the woman. The one from 20F. But this time, she smiled, and the reflection leaned forward, even though I hadn't. She whispered something I could finally understand. "You've been here before." Then she reached out, and the mirror cracked. From the inside, I slammed the door shut. But it was too late. Now, when I look at myself, I don't always recognize the eyes. They're darker, deeper. Sometimes they blink a beat too slow. Sometimes they don't blink at all. And I've started dreaming about corridors that don't exist. Rooms I've never seen. But in those dreams, I'm never alone. I always feel her behind me, watching, guiding, or maybe waiting for me to finally understand that she isn't trying to torment me. She's trying to prepare me. For what, I don't know. But I feel it coming. Something is waking up in this place, and I think I might be part of it. This morning there was a knock at my door. Not 20F, not the walls. My door. When I looked through the peephole, no one was there. but taped to the floor was a note in handwriting identical to mine, a welcome back, tenant. I didn't write it, but I felt the warmth of it, the pull of it, like I had finally come home. And somewhere deep inside me, a voice whispered that word again, the word I heard that first night, the word that echoes louder every time I try to run. Stay. The next time I saw the woman from 2E, she was being wheeled out on a stretcher. Her eyes were open, staring directly at me as they rolled her past my door, but they didn't blink. Not once. Her mouth moved slightly, as if trying to form words, but the only sound was the squeak of the gurney wheels and the low hum of paramedics whispering to each other. One of them crossed himself before entering the elevator. I leaned out into the hallway, trying to catch a glimpse inside her apartment, and that's when I saw it, the wallpaper peeled off in strips, every inch of the walls covered in charcoal scrawls like mine. Symbols repeating in dense spirals, layers upon layers of circles within circles. In the center, scrawled larger than the rest, was a word written in what looked like red ash. Remember. After they took her away, no one came to clean it. No one even shut the door. It just stayed open, like the apartment itself was breathing through it. That night, I didn't even pretend I could sleep. Around 2:33 a.m., my hallway light clicked on by itself. The bulb had been dead for 3 days. I stared at it for a long time before stepping out, barefoot, drawn more by instinct than courage. As soon as I did, I felt a shift, like walking through a curtain of warm air into something older than the rest of the building. The walls had a slight curve now, bending inward like the hallway had become a throat. I passed 2F and stopped in front of 2E. The door was still open. I stepped inside. The air was thick, almost chewy. There were flies, dozens of them, but they didn't move like flies should. They hovered in place, vibrating silently, like suspended ash in an invisible breeze. I passed through the kitchen, where every drawer had been pulled out and placed carefully on the floor, each filled with small rocks stacked in spirals. The living room was worse. Every mirror, every reflective surface, had been shattered and turned around to face the wall. The shards were taped together with long strips of hair. In the center of the room was a chair facing the TV. On the screen was a paused image of static, but within the grain I could make out faces. Hundreds of them. Blurred and shifting, each one pressing forward for a moment before receding back into the fuzz. I recognized my own face among them, eyes wide, mouth open in a silent scream. Then I heard the laughter. Not mocking. Not cruel. Just amused. From the bedroom. I shouldn't have gone in, but I did. The door creaked open to reveal a space utterly wrong. It was larger than it should have been. Far larger, extending far beyond the outer dimensions of the building itself. The ceiling arched like the inside of a cathedral, but instead of stained glass, the windows were filled with what looked like molars. Teeth, thousands of them embedded in black stone. In the center of the room was a bed, perfectly made, with someone lying beneath the sheets. I couldn't see a face, but the outline was unmistakable. Feminine, still, breathing, but only barely. The chanting started again, this time not through vents or behind walls. It came from under the bed, from the corners, from behind me. I turned, but the door was gone. The entire room had sealed shut, as if I had walked into a lung that had now exhaled me into its center. Then the figure in the bed sat up. Not suddenly. Slowly, the way a puppet might rise when pulled by invisible strings. Her hair fell like dark water over her face, and her arms extended outward as though beckoning me closer. But I couldn't move. Not from fear, because I wanted to. I wanted to climb into that bed beside her, wanted to let the room swallow me, wanted to stay. That was the most terrifying part. The desire. It was like being in love with a place, a structure, a thing. I didn't just fear the building anymore. I adored it. It felt like it knew me, understood my silences, answered my questions with shadows on the wall. I knew then that she wasn't trying to possess me. She was trying to make me part of her. Like the others. The ones who disappeared. The ones who stopped leaving messages, stopped paying rent, stopped existing anywhere except behind walls. I closed my eyes and screamed, not out loud, but inside. A mental scream, loud enough to shake something loose. When I opened them, I was back in my apartment, on the floor, the vent above me wide open. Something wet dripped down onto my chest from it. I reached up expecting water, but it was warm, sticky. Red. My bathroom mirror had fogged over, and on its surface was a smear that looked like a handprint. Not mine. I don't know how long I lay there. Eventually, I crawled to the kitchen and sat with my back to the fridge, trying to slow my breathing. I made myself a promise that I'd go see the building plans. Real ones, somewhere outside. The city office? Maybe. Or the fire marshal's archive. Anything that could prove the layout had changed, that I wasn't losing my mind. The next day, I left the building for the first time in weeks. It was like waking from underwater. Sounds were too sharp, air too clean, colors too bright. The city office didn't want to help. But after I lied and said I was doing a report for a local university, a young assistant brought out a dusty archive binder marked, Building 5060B, Permit History and Modifications. That was the official name for my complex. I flipped through permits, blueprints, renovation diagrams. Most of them were normal, standard layouts, minor repairs. But then I found it. A sheet with a corner missing burned along the edges as if it had been rescued from a fire. The blueprint showed a floor that didn't exist. A sub-level beneath the basement. 6 rooms, each marked not with numbers but with names. One of them was L. Benning, another was simply marked Mirror Room. There was no date, no approval stamps, no signatures, but the paper felt old. Real. I asked if the building had a basement. The clerk said it didn't. Not anymore. Caved in during early construction, he said. They poured over it and started again. I asked if I could see the original contractor records. He said those were sealed after the incident. What? What incident? I asked. He stared at me for a long time, then leaned forward and whispered, "That place isn't zoned for the number of tenants it claims. It never was. And the city doesn't ask questions when the rent's paid on time." I went home, clutching the blueprint like a lifeline. But the moment I stepped inside, I knew I wasn't alone. The temperature dropped instantly. My breath turned visible. The door shut behind me by itself. I tried turning on lights. Nothing worked. Not even my flashlight. The entire apartment had gone black. But not empty. Never empty. I heard footsteps. Bare feet on tile. Moving toward me from the kitchen. I backed into the living room, tripping over something soft. My own couch repositioned. I reached for the front door, but the knob was gone. Not broken. Gone. Like the door was a wall now. I dropped the blueprint. It hit the floor with a slap and immediately started to curl inward, edges burning up in slow motion without flame. As the paper folded into itself, I saw images flicker on its surface. People I recognized, tenants, neighbors, myself. Each face twisted slightly like it had been seen through a warped lens. I watched my own face blink out last, and then the blueprint was gone. In its place, a small black key. Cold, held, heavy, and etched with a symbol I had seen before, scratched into the mirror back in 20E. Without thinking, I bent down and picked it up. The second I did, the walls breathed. Not a metaphor. They expanded and contracted, plaster groaning, as if the entire apartment had become a ribcage. A voice behind me whispered, "You've opened the door." I turned. No one was there, but the hallway light had returned, and in its yellow flicker stood the woman. Not in 20F, not in 20E, in mine. This time she wasn't quiet. She spoke in a voice like wind through gravel. "There are others now," she said. "They followed you. I asked who." She smiled, and the skin on her face stretched far too wide. "They were tenants once, too, like you. They stayed too long. Now they want out, but you opened the lock. You gave them way in." I told her I didn't mean to, that I just wanted to understand. She reached out, and I felt her touch. Not on my skin, but inside my chest, my lungs. I couldn't breathe. Her hand was inside my breath. Then she said something I'll never forget. "The building doesn't want to hurt you. It wants to remember you. You are the archive now." I collapsed, parsed, or yesed, or minners. I don't know. When I woke up, the lights were back. The apartment looked normal again, clean, silent. But my reflection was wrong. In the mirror, I didn't blink. I didn't move. I just stared back at myself, eyes that weren't quite mine. And I smiled. Behind me, the woman watched, not angry, not kind, just present, as if waiting for me to take my place. And somewhere, under my floorboards, I heard footsteps pacing again. Not hers, mine. I tried to record the pacing beneath my floor. I set my phone to video mode, placed it on the tile, camera angled toward the wall, microphone pressed against the vent. I told myself if I captured it, if I saw it, I could fight it, label it, disprove it, turn it into something rational. But when I played back the recording, it didn't show footsteps. It showed me, sleeping on the couch, even though I hadn't been there when I started recording. And worse, there was a figure crouched beside the couch, head tilted toward my face like it was listening for a dream. The figure's body twitched unnaturally, like it was being rewound and fast-forwarded at the same time. Then it slowly turned to the camera, directly into the lens, and smiled. My smile. Not the one I use in pictures, but the one I saw in the mirror. That hungry, stretched, borrowed grin. Then the screen went black. No audio, no static. Just black. The file deleted itself seconds later. I hadn't touched anything. The next night, I tried to leave the building again. I made it as far as the lobby. The elevator button didn't light. The stairs led me in a loop. Every door I opened on the ground floor brought me right back into the hallway in front of my apartment. And worse, the hallway started shifting, first subtly, light fixtures changing position, carpet colors deepening, then more obviously, apartment numbers flickering between digits like broken clock displays. I watched 2C become 3F them ton before settling again as 2C. I knocked on it, desperate, just to prove something human still lived here. No one answered. I banged harder, still silence. But when I stepped back, I saw someone had written a message in condensation on the wall behind me. Just one word. Listen. And sen. And suddenly, the building did. I heard everything. The breathing of every person above and below me. The gurgling of pipes like vocal cords clearing. The sigh of the drywall contracting in rhythm with my heartbeat. I could hear thoughts. Not mine. Not clearly, but enough to recognize patterns. A woman on the third floor, weeping silently, praying to a god she wasn't sure existed. A child in 4B whispering numbers backward in the dark. A man on honey scratching the same spot on his arm over and over until it bled, whispering, "It's under there, it's under there." I covered my ears and screamed, but even that sounded distant, like I was buried beneath the floor of my own mind. Then came the voice again, the one from 20F. Calm. Present. You've tuned yourself. Now you can hear us. And I realized I hadn't escaped. I joined. I ran. I don't even know where. Every hallway bled into the next. Every stairwell twisted back into the building like it was growing around me. I passed the mailroom, but it had changed. Deeper now, longer, lined with hundreds of boxes, none of which had names. Just symbols, spirals, eyes, teeth. I saw my own mailbox, now marked with a jagged symbol that hadn't been there before. I opened it. Inside was a small cassette tape. No label. Just a strip of black ribbon curling out like a tongue. I don't own a cassette player. But later that night, while sitting in the corner of my darkened living room, I heard the sound of a tape rewinding. It came from inside the walls, then it clicked, began to play. A voice, soft and brittle, filled the room. Mine. But older, more tired, speaking slowly like someone trying to remember something they'd once promised to forget. I lived here before. I think. I tried to leave. The building let me, for a time, but I kept hearing it, the hum, the breath. You don't walk away from a body that remembers you. You return. And when you do, it's always waiting. You never move into this place. You awaken it. You feed it. You become it. But then silence. Then static. Then her voice. We were many. We were singular. We were forgotten. But you remembered. That's all we needed. I ran into the bathroom, flicked on the light, and stared at myself in the mirror, forcing my eyes open, forcing myself to look. My reflection was crying, but I wasn't. My face trembled, but my body stood still. Then the reflection leaned forward and whispered with my mouth, "There's something in the drain." And suddenly I couldn't hear anything but the gurgle of the sink. Water I hadn't turned on began to drip, then pour. A black liquid, thick and sluggish, spiraled into the bowl. I leaned closer and smelled it, copper, rot, and something faintly floral. I pulled back the metal drain cover. Beneath it was an eye. It blinked. I fell backward and smashed into the doorframe. When I looked again, the sink was clean, the water off, but the metal cover now had scratches on it, deep grooves like fingernails. 5 lines. Human. I tried boarding up the vents, painting over the walls, taping mirrors. None of it worked. The building isn't made of drywall and wires. It's made of memory. I understand that now. Every tenant leaves something behind, a breath, a thought, a grief, and the building keeps it, archives it, uses it. I started finding names carved beneath the paint in my apartment. Dozens of them. Some scratched into the baseboards, others written in pencil inside light sockets. All first names, all unfamiliar, except one. Mine, etched into the wooden lip beneath the front door, covered by the welcome mat. I never moved. It had been there before I moved in. I called the police. I told them I believed something was happening in the building. People disappearing, voices, possible evidence of past crimes. The officer who came was polite, tall, broad, calm. He walked through the apartment slowly, asked quiet questions. I told him about the stain on the ceiling, the mirror, the voice. He didn't laugh. He didn't smirk. He only asked, "Which unit?" I told him 20F. His face changed. He nodded once, said he'd file the report, then left. But an hour later, I saw him again, inside apartment 20F. Through the peephole, he wasn't alone. They stood in a circle, hands linked, faces bowed. A small fire burned in a dish at their feet, giving off blue smoke that coiled against the ceiling in unnatural shapes. The officer looked up directly at me, watching through the peephole. He mouthed something I couldn't hear. 3 words. Over and over. "We never left." I stepped back, heart hammering. The hallway had grown colder. When I looked through the peephole again, the apartment door was closed, and the number on it had changed. Not 20F. Not any number. Just a black spiral. That night, I found a door behind the closet in my bedroom. One that hadn't been there before. When I opened it, I expected another nightmare hallway, another distortion. But instead, it was a stairwell. Downward, endless. Concrete steps, wet with condensation. And lining the walls were thousands of photos, like old tenant ID badges. Faces staring out, all blank-eyed. Some smiling, some screaming. I found my photo halfway down. It was newer than the rest. Dated next week. Beneath it, a name I didn't recognize. Tenant B. Miles. That's not my name. I turned and ran back up. But the door at the top had vanished. I was locked in the stairwell for what felt like hours. Days, maybe. The lights flickered erratically. Shadows stretched across the steps and formed shapes I recognized but couldn't name. I finally found a second door. It led into the laundry room, but it wasn't my laundry room. The machines were older, rusted, the walls lined with black and white photos of people washing clothes. Each photo was the same angle, same posture, same expression. Each face turned slightly toward the lens, their eyes bleeding black. My name was scrawled in marker on the last photo, beneath a picture of someone who looked almost like Mead, but whose mouth stretched too wide. I took the stairs back up, and when I emerged onto my floor, the lights were all out. Every door open, every apartment silent. I walked through the hall whispering names I remembered. No one answered, until I reached my unit. The door wasn't just open, it was missing. Gun. In its place was a hollow frame of splintered wood. Inside, everything had changed. My furniture rotted, the walls stripped to beams. In the center of the room, carved into the floor with deep scorched marks, was a symbol I didn't recognize but immediately understood. It was an invitation, or maybe a warning, or maybe those are the same thing in a place like this. I stepped inside, and the door behind me rebuilt itself, nail by nail. Then the walls whispered in unison, "You live here now." And somehow I smiled. ChatGPT said I stopped remembering what life felt like outside the building. Not just the sounds or smells or sunlight through clean glass. Everything. Even the idea of having a job, a mother, a last name. It all grew distant like waterlogged photos too long left in the rain. My world became corridors and echoes and reflections that didn't match what they were supposed to. The mirror in the hallway now showed someone brushing their teeth in a bathroom that wasn't mine. The windows showed weather that didn't exist. And my own memories began to feel like they belonged to someone else entirely. I started writing things down again, not just what happened, but what was supposed to be real. My name, my birthday, favorite color, who I was before this building found me. But each morning when I woke, the ink had changed. My name became symbols. My memories rewrote themselves in a language I could almost, but not quite, read. The building was editing me one word at a time. The neighbors were vanishing faster now. Apartment doors stayed closed for days, then opened onto spaces that shouldn't be there. I peeked into 2B one night, and instead of a kitchen or couch, I saw a field of tall, unmoving grass, moonlight filtering down from a sky full of eyes instead of stars. A single shoe lay in the grass, child's. No sound, just wind that didn't move the blades. I slammed the door. Later, I found grass seeds in my own bathtub. I stopped opening doors after that. Didn't matter, they opened themselves. One afternoon, I think it was afternoon, I sat in my armchair staring at the television that hadn't worked in weeks, and it flicked on by itself. Not static this time, not ghost faces, just a live feed of me. Sitting in the chair, watching myself watch myself. Then the camera on the screen began to zoom out, revealing behind me a figure I hadn't noticed. The woman from 20F, but this time her face was clearer. No longer a blank shadow, but familiar. Painfully familiar. She looked like me, not entirely, but enough. Like a sibling I never knew I had. Like a version of myself that had grown inside walls instead of a womb. She leaned forward on the screen and whispered something I couldn't hear, but the screen began to distort, bending her image, tearing her mouth wide until it covered half her face. Words scrolled across the bottom like news headlines. Just one phrase repeating, Hiem Biske Brianch 4.2. I didn't understand what it meant, but the building did. That night, I heard voices in the walls arguing. Not whispering. Arguing. Not in English. Not even human. Layers of sound over sound, like multiple radio stations bleeding into one another, and every word aimed at me. I couldn't understand, but I could feel the intent, resentment, hunger. Then a new voice cut through them all. Clear. Calm. You're not supposed to be here yet, and that terrified me more than anything else. I started noticing the numbers. Scratched into floorboards, painted beneath vents, hidden behind peeling wallpaper. Every number in the building seemed wrong. Apartment Way was labeled Lene but written in Braille behind the fuse box as 5B. My unit, what I thought was 2D, was listed as Control Entry Node Instance Canine in tiny letters beneath the doorframe. None of it made sense. Until I stopped thinking of this place as a building. That's when the diagrams started appearing. On my walls, on my skin, they would manifest in sleep. I'd wake with ink smudges on my palms and neck, my calves covered in symbols that pulsed faintly under blacklight. I tried washing them off. They reappeared deeper. I tried carving one away. That night, I woke to find it had reformed. Not on skin, but under it, like muscle had been rearranged. I studied the diagrams, cross-referenced with symbols from religions, occult texts, even engineering manuals. The closest match was circuitry, but not for machines. For memory, like this building wasn't a place at all, like it was a container. For what? I was close to understanding it one night. I'd locked myself in the bedroom, placed every object I owned around me in a perfect circle, items from before from outside, keys, ID card, a photo of my sister, all things untouched by the building. I sat in the center, cross-legged, notebook in hand. I whispered every name I could remember. Mine, my mother's friends from school, even people I hated. I repeated them like prayers. I thought maybe I could anchor myself. Maybe I could pull the meng out of the thing I was becoming. And for a while, it worked. The air around me calmed. The light from the hallway dimmed, and I felt my heartbeat for the first time in days. Real, clean and mine. I wrote the word, "scape," in bold ink in the center of the page. But then the closet opened. Not a creak, not a squeak. It opened, fast and intentional, and inside was me. Not a reflection, not a twin, just me as I had been before the building. Hair neat, eyes human, skin without markings. She stepped out and looked at me with sadness, not malice, not joy, just deep, etching sadness. "I tried too," she said, and then she vanished. The light returned. The items around me were gone. My ID card now said, "Archived, instance resolved." My sister's photo was blank. I wasn't anchored anymore. I was cataloged, filed, part of the structure. I screamed until blood filled my throat, but the building absorbed it. No echo, no feedback, just consumption. The building had been feeding on me in pieces. First my reflection, then my history, then my name. Now it wanted my will. I tried jumping from the window, a final, stupid attempt. But the outside was not real. I broke through the glass and landed back in my living room. No injury, no noise. The air was still. The broken window behind me reassembled itself with a soft sigh, like the building was disappointed in me. Then came the dreams, more vivid, more detailed. But they weren't dreams. They were logs. I stood in halls I'd never walked but recognized instantly. Apartment 8L sector. A small child screaming in a language I somehow knew. A woman dragging herself across tiles that burned where her hands touched. A maintenance man flipping circuit breakers that were labeled not in volts but in emotions, grief, fear, desire. And each time he flipped one, an apartment door slammed shut. Forever. I woke with ash on my hands and the smell of ozone in the air. I wrote everything down, but each morning the pages rearranged themselves. Paragraphs would scroll like credits on a screen. Dates would rewrite. Names would vanish. I stopped keeping journals. I started carving the story into the wall instead. Deep, permanent, but now even the walls heal overnight. Every trace of me is being erased and replaced with another version. One who stays. I hear the others now. Constantly. They call themselves branches. Some whisper from vents. Some knock in threes. Some crawl just beneath the floor and press faces up from the laminate like it's paper stretched over breath. One whispered in my ear as I lay in bed last night. "You're almost ready." Ready for what? I asked aloud. No answer. But when I turned on the bathroom light, the mirror showed something else. Not me. Not the building. Just a doorway. Ancient. Etched with teeth instead of symbols. And I knew I had seen it before. In the diagrams on my skin. In the circuit buried beneath the floor. In the pattern of the screams. It's the original door. The one she opened. The one that made the building remember. I know now that this place is not haunted. It is haunting not by spirits, by selves, by the echo of every person who ever lived here and never left, by the versions of us who never got out. And the building doesn't hate us. It wants us. It loves us. It wants us to become so familiar we vanish into it, to replace its dead tenants, to write new blueprints in breath and blood. And I think I've finally figured out where that door is. Not in the building, not in the mirror, in me. I just have to open it. They say when you forget yourself completely, something else can move in. I didn't understand that until the night I opened the door. Not physically, but the one inside me. The diagrams, the voices, the rewritten pages of my life had all been nudging me toward it like hands guiding a sleepwalker through fog. I hadn't realized how close I was until I stopped fighting. That's the trick, I think. The building doesn't force its way in. It waits until you invite it, until your memories go brittle and your name starts tasting foreign in your mouth. Then it whispers gently and asks, "May I?" And I said yes. It began with a warmth. Not terrifying, but gentle, the way a child might cling to your hand in the dark. I felt the pressure behind my eyes soften, the tension in my limbs evaporated, and suddenly I could breathe again. Not the ragged, frantic breath of panic, but smooth, weightless, like the air itself was welcoming me back. The light in my apartment turned amber, not electrical light, not firelight. Something older. It leaked through the seams in the walls like sap, and when it touched my skin, the symbols burned away, not in pain, but in release. I was being cleansed, prepared. The walls stopped creaking. The footsteps stopped pacing. The mirror showed only what was in front of it. For the first time in weeks, I saw only myself. No bleeding eyes. No smiling depelg angers. Just me. And yet, I knew I was no longer alone. The building was inside me now. It didn't want to destroy me. It wanted to use me. As a channel. As a key. The final archive. I sat cross-legged in the center of the room. The same room where I once tried to anchor myself, and I whispered all the names again. But this time, they weren't my memories. They were the buildings. It flooded me with images, voices, entire lifetimes that had occurred within these walls, stacked like geological layers under wallpaper and dust. I felt the laughter of children from 1953, the sorrow of a woman abandoned in 1977, the rage of a man who saw through the floorboards in 99. I was them, all of them, briefly. And then I was more. The building spoke, not in words. Not even in thought, but in being. It showed me the beginning, long before it had tenants. Before bricks. The lot had once been a clearing, a silent pocket of earth no bird dared cross. Beneath it lay a shape, not man-made, not natural. A thing buried, perhaps by time or intention. A relic of something that never wanted to be found again. But people, as they always do, built on top of it. First a hospital, then nothing. Then this. It wasn't that the building caused the madness. It was protecting us from what was below, until someone opened it. Until she did. Leila Benning, the tenant in 20F, the origin point. The one who listened too closely, who didn't look away when the wall peeled itself back and whispered its true name. She had tried to contain it, to absorb it, to become its vessel so no one else had to. But the building forgot her. And in forgetting her, it weakened, until I came, until I remembered. Now the building needed a new vessel, and it chose me. I felt the shift as my spine aligned with something deeper than gravity. My eyes stopped blinking because they didn't need to anymore. Light no longer hurt. Hunger vanished. Fear dissolved. I stood and walked to the bathroom. The mirror shimmered like water and then opened. No reflection, just the door from the dreams. The one with teeth etched into the frame were every name I'd ever tried to write in my journals. Twisted, imperfect, but still echoing the shape of me. I stepped through. The other side wasn't hell. It wasn't heaven either. It was archive, a corridor of doors suspended in endless space. Each door labeled with strange, rotating symbols that morphed depending on how I looked at them. Behind each one a life, not just the tenants of this building. Other places, other structures like it, like mine, thousands of them, across time, across versions, all part of the same network. A memory system built by something unknowable to catalog human experience. Not for control, not for punishment, but for preservation. I was one of many curators, and now it was my turn. A door opened to my left. Inside was a room filled with newspaper clippings, audio tapes, and digital screens replaying my descent in perfect detail. Every word I spoke, every journal entry, every breath I took, archived, cross-referenced, tagged. In the center of the room stood a console. Upon it, a single button. C-O-N-R-M-I-I-W-O. I placed my hand on the console, and it welcomed me. The ceiling above me flickered, and I saw the image of my old apartment. Unit 2D now labeled closed, integrated, stabilized. The building had accepted the patch. It had repaired the wound opened by Leila Benning. It had updated its memory. And I was now part of it. The other curators appeared around me not in physical form, but as sensations, whispers of identity, echoes of rooms that had once been real. We communicated in pulses of thought. I was assigned my new designation, Branch 4.2, Eco-Handler. My task was simple. I would monitor new buildings built over ancient spaces, identify early ruptures, contain them before they reached surface consciousness, use my memories to interpret human response, adapt, repair, remember, because that's all the building had ever wanted, to remember. And now I understood what the scream in the vent had truly been. It was a memory being lost. Someone's life fading before the archive could retrieve it. And when that happens, the system becomes unstable. It starts creating noise, echoes, repeats. That's why some buildings feel haunted. They're just searching for the memory they lost. But if too many fragments go missing, the system becomes corrupted. It can no longer distinguish between past and present. Then comes collapse. Collapse of memory. Collapse of time. I walk back through the mirror, now a stabilized portal. My apartment returned to normal. Almost. I no longer needed food, or sleep, or mirrors. My job was now to watch, to feel for when new tenants began forgetting who they were, to ensure the echoes stayed echoes, to make sure no door opened too wide too soon. And as I sat in the armchair once more, facing the blank television screen, I smiled, not out of joy but purpose. I had found my place, a victim, not as a tenant, but as the building itself. And now, when a new resident knocks on the leasing office door, when they sign their name and get handed the keys to 2D, they don't see me. Not at first. But I see them. I feel them the moment they walk past the mailboxes and pause, sensing something. I see them hesitate when their key sticks in the door just a little too long. And I wait. Because one day, they'll ask the question I once did. Who lived here before me? And they'll hear it. From the walls, the vents, the mirror, just a whisper. Not angry, not cruel. Just patient and eternal. You enjoyed the video? Give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and tap the bell so you never miss an update.